Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Label Paranormal Podcast. I'm your host, Tom.
And I'm Mark.
And we're here to discuss everything and anything labeled paranormal that you can think of. And the topic we're very excited about for today is a little bit of a case study into the Kecksburg UFO incident, or as some call it, an acorn from space. Affectionately, it's known as that just because it resembled the shape of an acorn or a bell that fell from space. And when I say from space and crashed in Kecksburg, Pennsylvania, I don't mean it just came straight from the sky. There's multiple cities, sites, areas that's seen this thing. So, if you're not a UFO historian like the two of us, I'm going to go ahead and read a little bit about the UFO Kecksburg crash. So, the evening of December 9th, 1965, left an unusual imprint on the memories of many residents of a southwestern Pennsylvania town a little before 5 p.m. A raging fireball was reportedly seen falling from the sky before finally crash landing in the woods near a small town, Kecksburg, Pennsylvania, which is about a 45-minute drive from Pittsburgh. Eyewitnesses said they felt vibrations and a loud thump at the time of the crash, and the fireball was seen by people across 6 states, even as far away as Canada. Well, what exactly was this unknown flying object that crashed in Kecksburg? When locals visited the crash site, they discovered an unusual bell-shaped craft without wings or any recognizable propulsion system. The bronze-colored structure resembled an acorn, and it was estimated to be about 15 feet long or the size of a Volkswagen Beetle. Timeout. We use everything but the metric system. Measuring in Volkswagen Beetles. Adding to the bizarre occurrence, the Kecksburg UFO featured a design reminiscent of Egyptian-like hieroglyphics that were engraved on the outside of the craft. Within hours, military personnel arrived at the UFO crash site to confiscate the wreckage. Local newspapers reported that the area around the crash was immediately sealed off by order of the U.S. Army and the Pennsylvania State Police. In fact, according to a story in the Tribune Review, police officials ordered the area roped off to await the expedited arrival of both U.S. Army engineers and possibly civilian scientists. It didn't take long for the military officials to load the bell-shaped craft up to their trucks, cover everything with tarps, and haul away the last remnants of the crash. There were concerns at the time whatever it was came crashing to Earth was radioactive, but ultimately the only aspect of the story that was confirmed was how baffling it was for the residents in the area. They didn't know what it was, and they didn't know where it was from, and they didn't know what it was made of, but they sure shared the confusion that was brought in by everyone. So that's a little insight into a background into the Kecksburg UFO crash. It did a pretty good job of talking about the area's residents and things like that. But one thing I wanted to highlight too, Mark, is when I say this thing flew over 6 states, and you think, okay, 6 states, well, if you live in my area, southwest or southeast Pennsylvania, you got 4 states within like 10 miles. It's probably not the best way to talk, about how big this thing was and how long it was coming down. So another site labeled the 6 states and Canada, which was Detroit, Michigan, Windsor, Ontario, Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York, and even West Virginia. So if you're not from the East Coast or anything like that, you're talking thousands of miles that this thing had flown over before it crash landed. It wasn't just a small area. This thing, unfortunately, was going down and probably knew it was going down. And lucky for everybody involved, it landed in rural, outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, which was mostly farmland or forest cover. So, where do we start with this? Where do we start with this? Pennsylvania's Roswell is what this is.
Yeah.
We have the date, we have the time. Where do we start? How do we start to unpack this? I guess what we have to look at first is the aftermath. We obviously don't know what it was, and we don't know why it crashed. But what we can tell you is that Army engineers and possibly civilian scientists, and Army engineers is a very loose word for they're the scientists. They're the guys that are able to identify material,
Yes.
structures, things like that. You're
Yeah.
bringing in you're answering what is this with your best and brightest. All right, that's what you're sending out there. You're not sending. I thought it was adorable that I mentioned the Pennsylvania State Police. They were
Oh yeah.
probably getting coffee and roping off and directing traffic. Let's not be
Yeah.
mistaken about their involvement in this.
Yeah.
Where did you honestly think they were? In the material, probably not. So where there's smoke, there's fire. We talk about this a lot on the podcast. I'm a big proponent of that. If something crashes and it's a fireball, that doesn't have to necessarily mean UFO. Civilian planes go down and their people claim they're fireballs. But the incident response of this is the 70s. They had radar. They had tracking equipment. Mark, what are we supposed to think at first when something goes down, you feel a thud, and the first immediate reaction is military?
Well, the first reaction actually kind of reminds me of the Vegas alien case a little bit. I think that the police saw it in the sky and they responded to it, or at least the firefighters did. The volunteer firefight station.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the volunteer firefighter station was a mile away from the incident, so they saw it very clearly land, and they were under the impression that it was an airplane crashing because of how dramatic it was, how bright it was, how clear of an object that it was. And you have to remember, this is December 9th, so this is in the fall time. The trees don't have leaves anymore, and this thing lands it's a rural area, but it's a portion of the woods that's near the road. So it's not like it's hidden away. People saw it and they went over to it to see what it was. And that's the thing. It is that Kecksburg, it's kind of incredible. It really is like Pennsylvania's Roswell, and it's one of the most important UFO cases because there's still no clear answer to what happened. Like most UFO cases, even Roswell, they got away with the weather balloon thing. This one, nobody the most defined answer is from a bunch of astronomers who did not witness the event, who said maybe it's a meteor, but it also it displays characteristics of not being a meteor because it seemed to move its trajectory. And so astronomers tracked this object, this very bright quote unquote meteor, going across 6 states and down it actually about from where the Great Lakes are, through the Great Lakes, down through Pennsylvania, and they tracked it. And then as the object went past Pittsburgh and towards Greenburgh, it seemed to change direction. And as the object got to Kecksburg, and witnesses claimed to see it do a sort of controlled landing. It didn't really crash. It slowed down and landed in the woods. So, I mean, you have this verified it going through 6 states, and then when it actually gets to the part where people can see it, then it's bullshit? Is that really what's going on here? What's the implication here? Is that all these witnesses made this up? They saw, and that's the thing. That's the craziest thing with this. It's one of these cases where you have all these witnesses from different points. These are not, I mean, they might all be part of the same town, but they're all approaching this event from different angles, So you have all these different eyewitness accounts. People going into the woods seeing this. It appeared as though it was a bronze object about 15 feet long, with no rivets or any kind of machining marks on it, with hieroglyphics on it. And just like what you said, I watched an interview of one of the firefighters, and this is just an interview in the 90s. These guys, he was a young man back then. He's fully sane, and he's describing he went to the woods, he saw this object like this, and the military was there within 15 minutes. So, the fire station's a mile away, literally a mile away. They get there in 3 minutes flat. They're
Yeah.
watching. They saw. Then 15 minutes after that, the U.S. Army shows up. Okay? I forget whether it's the Army or the Air Force. I think it's the Air Force. The Air Force shows up. And, 3 days after this, the Air Force's official statement on this is we found absolutely nothing in the forest. Okay.
Yep.
So, all right. So now here's the deal. Okay. When you have these kind of events where, authorities like firefighters or police see it in the sky and they have to go respond to it because they think it looks so dramatic. It looks like, oh shit, that could be a plane crash. Even in those events, the military does not show up for that. So what the fuck is this? Like, why did the military show up so quick for this? And the cool thing about Kecksburg is that I feel as though it's an it's like a classic small town monster story. It's an inspiration for a lot of different things, like E.T., Stranger Things, Super 8. There's a lot of tropes you could draw from this, like potentially a weird military facility in small town America, and there's some kind of extraterrestrial presence. It's just cool. It's part of American folklore, and I really like it a lot. What do you think?
I kind of want to double down on this a little bit here. Are you ready for a little bit more information that we have
ready.
here? Okay. So, have you heard of Stan Gordon or his files about this?
I love Stan Gordon.
Okay. So, let me go into a couple of excerpts that he has about this case. News crews from the Pittsburgh area TV stations were on scene that evening. There were news stories about the occurrence that aired on Thursday evening and Friday. I recall watching the broadcast of the incident the next day that was in black and white on one of the stations. Over the years, I requested the TV stations to attempt to locate the archival newsreels for that day in 1965. None of that footage has ever been found after various attempts that were conducted to locate what had been broadcast and should have been in the station's news library archives. Over the years, various Kecksburg Fire Department officials have confirmed to me that records for December of 1965, such as the initial incident report logs for fire vehicles, were all missing. Every other record was accounted for. Independent witnesses who were in the area near where the object fell that evening confirmed there were not just one, but two military flatbed tractor-trailer trucks on the scene, along with other military vehicles. Independent witnesses also reported men in what they referred to as moon suits. Keep in mind, this is rural Pittsburgh area in the 60s. They haven't seen much. So what they referred to as moon suits or hazmat suits to us around the area where the object had fallen. That's not unrealistic to think about. You don't know what it is or what happened there. But it's quite likely that there was already a quick government UFO recovery program in operation in 1965, which was alluded to on July 26, 2023, by whistleblower David Grush. A former military intelligence officer testified to Congress under oath that he had information that the government has a secret program that involves the recovery of UFOs or UAP. So it's interesting that within Project Blue Book's report, right? That was the report of the time. That's what held this or information in this area, was that the entry on this case stated a 3-man team had been dispatched to Acme, Pennsylvania to investigate and pick up an object that started a fire.
Okay, so it's documented then.
So it is documented.
Yeah.
Some of the locals were certain that they began to see a small military presence around Kecksburg within an hour after the object had fallen. It was in the next few hours, however, that a considerable number of military vehicle personnel would arrive in the area. Local and national newspapers mentioned the military activity in Kecksburg, but not the object. Wow.
Yeah.
So that goes into, Stan Gordon, his files are top notch. He's an individual that I do place trust in. There's a lot to unpack there, so let's take our time with it. The locals there are believable. You know what I mean? They didn't. No one, not once in
Who's
anything
making
that
this
we
up?
read. Exactly,
You
exactly.
know?
Not once in anything that we read did you hear anyone say, "I think it's this. I think it's
Yeah.
that." No,
They
not
clearly saw the
one.
same thing.
Yes, they're not alluding to guesses, and they're not trying to say, "Oh, it's definitely this." Not one thing that I've read about or heard or seen or listened to had anybody mention what they just said. I don't know what it
There's no
is, and I
variations.
yeah,
There's no variations. Nobody, like the way that they report it is matter of factly, as though an airplane is crashing. Like this is like how you would read an airplane crash report. You know, like a bunch of eyewitnesses saw this specific thing happen, and that's what happened. Like it all lines up. It all matches. You know, these people are not. It's not like they decided to all go out at 5 o'clock in the afternoon on December 9th and make this shit up. You know, people out in rural Pennsylvania, they're not going out in the woods. A bunch of them aren't going to go out in the woods and do
if
that.
you are,
You
invite
know?
us. We'll kick it
Yeah,
with you
exactly.
too.
I'll do that. Yeah. Yeah.
So, all right. So, with Stan and everything that he got there, Project Blue Book talks about it. Let's take this trajectory here. No pun intended. But, you have the military saying, I didn't find anything. You have Project Blue Book that says we found something. Now,
Mhm.
even they're trying to kick it under the rug a little bit by saying it was an object that started a fire. You're not telling them what it is. However, they are saying it was an object.
Yeah.
So you have two military counteracting reports
Yeah.
there. You got to throw away the one that says nothing because
Yeah.
by default, you're not going to have one that does say something in the military report. So the
Yeah.
fact that came out, which was I want to know, it was the X Files before the X Files, basically.
Right.
Like that's what it was in the
Yeah.
60s, 70s, or late 60s, early 70s
Yeah.
is when it died out. But when you have all of that and you have these reports right there labeled and we found something, why? Why make these people look like fools? These are God-fearing, salt of the earth individuals that go to work, come home, raise their kids, and that's all they do. And you're calling them liars, one, who are the people that turn out to vote for you. They're the people that turn out to support you all military. What did you have to gain? What were you trying to do? Were you trying to control the media? Because that makes a lot of sense looking at how you reacted, right? How you
Mhm.
reacted to this situation. Yeah, that speaks a lot of sense to me that you just wanted the media not to blow this up out of proportion. And if you had the time to go over 6 states and crash and not go 6 miles into the earth or everything break apart, you had to be coming down over a long, long period of time. So when those Army people or Air Force were dispatched and got to Kecksburg, they didn't leave when it hit the ground. They were already en route. They were already en route. And,
Yeah. They were. That's the thing. They had
Mhm.
to have already been tracking it. The only way that they could have gotten there, unless there's some
Yeah,
secret facility there in Kecksburg, is they had to have been tracking it.
they were tracking
You
it from
know?
right pat. If I were to, if I
Yeah.
were to,
Well, that's in those articles is that it's alluded that they took those flatbeds right over to they took them to Columbus, Ohio, and then they took them to Wright Pat in Hangar 18. You know?
Hangar 18, absolutely. There are individuals who have spoken out after they served time or they did their time working at Right Pat that can allude to not just Kecksburg, but they had a protocol where they would bring it in, they would bring a material in under a tarp. You didn't look under the tarp; it was
Mm-hmm.
under a tarp for a reason, and they went down whichever level they needed to go underneath
Right.
of the underground levels that are there. And
Yeah.
you were, almost like a receptionist. Like, you were the guy loading them into like a car wash where you're telling them, come on, come on. That's basically what they were
Yeah.
doing. So these individuals weren't allowed, first of all, to see, but allowing them to even see a flatbed with a tarp on it. And you have Kecksburg, who other people saying, yeah, there was a flatbed with tarps on it. Come on. There's two ends. There's two ends. There's no need to hide this stuff. Not
Yeah.
to mention, there's a little more into this that we can get into as well. is that there are some reports of individuals who were watching this who had a good view. This is a lot of rural property, so it's very conceivable that you could walk over a hill and look into, the very hill, Appalachia, right? People that were looking in on this crash site, there's multiple reports that not only did you have the two flatbeds with the tarp, but there were boxes, and they said human-sized boxes that could have contained non-human biologics, I guess is the word that we can call it now. But the fact that if this was, we got rushed whistleblower testimony about a UFO retrieval program, which obviously this is right in the wheelhouse because he started talking about it in the 30s. So this is the later
Yeah.
60s. You have this going on. You have the non-human biologics. Could this specific case be what he was referencing?
Well, I think this specific case was incredibly important, and this seems to overwhelmingly line up with
Mm-hmm.
what David Grush was saying.
I
In
agree.
fact, I mean, this is that I mean, it says in the Blue Book report, sent out 3 guys to go pick up object.
Yeah,
That is the definition of a crash retrieval program. Like, there it is.
yeah,
I mean, like it's I don't know. It's so clear that this is obviously a very important part of that program. This happened. The Air Force is, and I think in one of those articles, in the Wikipedia article, the Wikipedia article for this incident is very interesting because of how
okay.
revealing it is.
Pull it up. Let's read
Yeah,
it.
there's some one detail that they mentioned in the Wikipedia article. Here, I'll just share this. There we go. Let me see. Where is it? Yeah, okay. So this is interesting. Okay, this is really crazy. So, they were trying to push this idea that it was a meteor, and then so Leslie Keene, who wrote the 2017, New York Times article, actually teamed up with the Sci-Fi Channel back in 2003 and sued the crap out of NASA to try to release the Kecksburg files.
The
Um,
unholy alliance.
yeah, yeah, and so NASA, sued NASA under the Freedom of Information Act for the lost files.
Yep.
NASA agreed to search for those records after being ordered by court. During the hearing, Steve McConnell, NASA's public liaison officer, testified that 2 boxes of paper from the time of the Kecksburg incident were missing. But here's the thing: when they were trying to disprove, when NASA was trying to disprove this, they found metal at the crash site that they tried to attribute to the Cosmos 96 Soviet spacecraft. That they've been trying to link Kecksburg to Cosmos 96 because it went around. It also went down like a day prior, but then they proved that there's no way it was Cosmos 96. So what crash material did NASA find? But here's another thing about this Wikipedia article. In 2008, space writer James Oberg suggested that NASA was unlikely to possess such documents. In his view, it was highly likely that the supposed NASA team that investigated the site were in fact Air Force personnel who identified themselves as NASA personnel, something regularly done by military personnel in civilian clothes in the 1960s. Okay? That's part of the fucking crash retrieval program. Like,
yeah. It's a lot.
Yeah, like, I mean, oh, okay, so you're just like openly admitting that they lie, that the Air Force lies about space stuff exactly like this. Like, it just lines up, it all lines up, man.
it does all line up, and I 100% believe that they would do that because it's in their best interest. Is there any piece of documentation that says the Air Force has to announce themselves as Air Force? I don't believe so. They can call
No.
themselves whatever, whoever they want to be. And
Well, yeah,
when you come off as somebody who, for NASA, it's it's happier, right? It's a better feeling than saying I'm
right.
from the Air Force.
Well, you
Um,
have to realize that this time period, if we follow David Grush's timeline and a couple other, really well researched timelines, the 1960s are the time period when the U.S. was in extreme military industrial complex turmoil. The
yeah.
president of the United States was just shot in 1963,
Hmm.
over the military industrial complex, and you have the military basically in some ways going rogue. This is the age of the military doing all the subterfuge bullshit where they lie about things, they send men in black out to intimidate people, they assassinate people. I mean, they probably still did this kind of stuff into the 70s and 80s for sure, but they don't really operate like that anymore. But this is like the golden age of them being bullies, lying about shit and covering stuff up.
Did you shoehorn in a CIA conspiracy in Tennessee?
Well, that's the thing is that
Outstanding.
it,
Outstanding.
well, the thing is, you have to. I mean, if we follow this, it's the CIA Office of Global Access which
Yeah.
coordinates all of this. You
Yeah,
know?
they do, and they did, and um, yeah, for what it's worth, there where there's smoke, there's fire, and read the documentation yourself. We, you know, it's quite ironic that false flag theories were originated around the time Kennedy was in office, and he absolutely said no to all of them. How poetic, I guess, but that's a different time for a different subject.
That's
And
a different
I'm
episode.
very impressed that you put that in there because, man, did I think Kecksburg to a conspiracy? Yeah, that's the content I'm here for. I hope you enjoy that, readers. That's one of the highlights of this early podcast. One of the highlights of season two or anything was shoehorning a conspiracy, but I'm ecstatic about it.
It's
So
about converging conspiracies. You got to connect all the dots.
yeah, yeah. Have a cardboard, or I mean a corkboard and string in
Yeah,
a room in your house, then you're not living.
in my
It's just
basement. Yeah, no,
yeah,
I'm gonna be down there chain smoking cigarettes.
yeah, yeah, yeah. There's like 15 god damn it's per minute,
Yeah,
So
it all goes back to Pepe Sylvia. Have you ever seen that episode of Always Sunny in Philadelphia?
yeah, that's what you got to do. And if you're not doing it, you're doing a disservice to the world. And take that, NSA guy watching our
Exactly.
recording. Take that. And then we fade to black. Just wait for it. So, but getting back to Kecksburg and putting our UFO hat back on. Um, One thing that I always found interesting with the misinformation of you know making you look here when the actual story's over here is that could this, and this is what I'm holding a little bit of you know not hope but a little reservation I have, because we have to be critical of things too, is that could this, now keep in mind the time, 1965, right in the heart of it. I mean, you're 2 years, 3 years off of Bay of Pigs and a complete national disgrace. So our stock is not high. You know what I mean? In this Cold War going on, right? Could this have been our crappy attempt at making a craft? And if it
Yes.
messes up, we throw hieroglyphics on it, and we pull the whole rigmarole of conspiracy, cover up, none of that, all that kind of stuff, and we're testing it out. And look, it failed. It failed horribly. Multiple or two nations saw it, multiple states, and it landed. and people were in hazmats because they knew what we were trying to mess with in terms of the combustion was probably not healthy. So, showing up in hazmat to a plane crash is unrealistic. You wouldn't see that. So why did they show up to this in that type of garb? So let's do the reverse conspiracy. Where do you land, and what's bringing you
So
back?
So I think I have two theories about this, and that's one of them. And I
Okay.
think there really is only two real theories here. Is what you said, or it was an extraterrestrial craft. I think that. So basically what you said, and I think that lines up with a lot.
Mhm.
I think. I think the Glock was real. I think the Germans were trying to develop anti-gravity technology back in the late 30s in Germany, and I think they discovered something, and their scientists came over here, and we started working on that technology too. And it could have been some type of anti-gravity device. It resembles the Bell.
It does.
They responded as though it was a radiation event. Um, I think it's very interesting but it's also the same time period where, I mean, if we go into deep conspiracy theory territory, private contractors were trying to develop certain frequencies that would knock UFOs out of the sky, and perhaps they knocked one out of orbit.
Ooh, now that's very interesting.
Yeah.
Um, so I can just grab a quick image here. Let's do that. Do that. So, and how did you pronounce it again? D Glock or Die
D-Glock.
Glock?
Yeah, I say, well, it is DeGlock. It is
Okay.
DeGlock.
So with no, that's not it. But yeah, so when you have this bell, and the Nazi bell, whatever you want to call it, right? Um, People have reported finding this in odd areas, right? People have found these type of things, and anti
Right.
gravity is exactly one of the points of it. But another one was more of a time machine, right?
Yeah.
And so,
Um.
as a time
Yeah.
machine, and how that could be, and now I finally have it. So, thank you for your patience. Um, so here is what it would look like.
Mm-hmm. That's the Glock. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, Nazi bell or whatever you wanted to, whatever you prefer to call it.
Yeah.
Um,
I believe there's actual
and
footage of this thing actually
yeah,
levitating, and it's like hooked up to a chain,
so it wouldn't go anywhere.
so it wouldn't go anywhere. Yeah. No. Yeah. It's pretty wild, but it's like
Yeah.
really old footage.
When you talk about physics at the time, and at the time this happened, and even the previous 30 years before this 35 to 65, the we weren't the biggest baddest thing back then.
Yeah, we
The
weren't.
Russians had us for a lot of the Cold War, but we'll whitewash that
Yeah.
history. The Germans were the experts on physics. They were the teachers to us.
Yeah.
It's not impossible to think that they found something, and being smart people, they read the writing on the wall that they're like, this guy's a nut. we're gonna
Yeah.
get killed if we keep doing this for him. Let's help
Yeah.
somebody else. For whatever
Yeah.
reason they picked us, and it's probably because they knew of the expansion plan in World War II of how going um, France and then eventually into England and things like that. So they needed to put a good barrier between us and nothing like a 3,000-mile ocean, right? So they're over here, they're helping us out. Um, the the science that we used later down the line, and the movie just came out, Oppenheimer. You know what I mean? The science was developed back then to allow us, to. I mean, literally, it's the saying, "Standing on shoulders of giants." We did that. We
Well,
took all their knowledge to create things for us.
and
So go ahead.
yeah, well, and I just want to add here that the German physicists of the time, the ones that they brought over for the space program, especially Werner von Braun, some of these guys were really into the occult, really into woo stuff, Aleister Crowley stuff. I think Werner von Braun, this is the craziest thing. I think Werner von Braun, Aleister Crowley, and L. Ron Hubbard, who made Scientology, all in like the 30s or 40s, were living in California doing drugs and
Yes.
like trying to do like satanic rituals, or not really satanic rituals, but like they were trying to practice like
Like an alternate religion.
hermetic order of the Golden Dawn kind of rituals to, it's very interesting. It kind of goes back to, it reminds me of what Diana Pasulka said about higher up um, events that happen in NASA, like when they reveal a new rocket. Pasulka says that higher ups at NASA actually do like rituals to Greek gods. So it's weird how much of the occult is involved in this sort of stuff. What are the hieroglyphics there to throw us off, or are the hieroglyphics like magic sigils? I
No,
know that sounds crazy, but it's just kind of wild to think about.
the actual term was cast on it by individuals who might not, they just know that looks like that from a textbook, and they're at the mercy of their own vocabulary. That nobody
Yeah.
says it had to have been that. It definitely could have thrown them off, and them looking to satanic rituals and other things is to me a little bit of the constant yearning of, tell me what to do, tell us where to go, what to do.
Yeah.
um it, you might need to pray to every different type of thing if you're coming up with math on, where a calculator today has 100 times more of the computing power than what they had back then, and you had pencil and paper to get a rocket on a rock. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's
So,
a good point.
you know, blame them for being like, Benny from the Mummy and praying to all the
Yeah,
different,
exactly. That's what
like,
it reminds me of. It reminds me of that scene from The Mummy.
it works. I got
Yeah.
six people. you know, I did a bunch of numbers on a piece of paper, and it's going to tell me they're going to fly up.
Yeah.
Hopefully it works for them. But no, it's a great point that what you said, because there's a lot of talk about some of the things that has become declassified, whether it's from Germany after ending the war and now being declassified because it became our document, or things from the Kremlin and the KGB and what they declassified and the weird
Yes.
nutty things they were into.
Yes.
uh, they were a lot closer to Germany. They knew what they were doing, and they wanted to do the things their own. So by proxy, what was going on in there by what they're declassifying on their end.
Yeah.
Hybridization,
Oh yeah.
human engineering,
Yeah.
um, like quantum theory before we even had a name for it, quantum computing before you even had a name for it. So we're always trying to search for things to get us to that God level. This could just be a failed experiment in that regard.
Well, it's interesting that you brought up Russia, because they actually, I mean, it's not really the same phenomenon, but in Siberia, they seem to come across these metallic spheres that are just out in the middle of the woods. And they're big. They're like really big metallic spheres. And there's lots of them. Like Siberia's a huge portion of Siberia is basically unexplored or uninhabited, and these metallic spheres seem to be out there, just out in the woods, like as if they were from some cosmic event. And people say that they're like UFOs. They're like these um, drone UFOs. These metallic spheres. And um, if we go with some of the more far out lore, the government apparently was trying to knock these things out of the sky to crack them open to get element 115 out of them to power their own UFOs.
Yeah, the idea of stealing something rather than obtaining it yourself is definitely not new to the American government.
Yeah.
That was brought up is 100% believable.
Yeah.
You know, there's so many areas, and we think technology has you and me recording a podcast right now, right? It has us talking here, where technology makes the world feel infinitely small.
Yes.
But the science doesn't lie. There's areas of this world that have not had human footprints on it. There's uncontacted tribes, all over the world. You can't even walk on Antarctica without a permit, basically.
Yeah, which is crazy.
Which is nuts. So, and then whatever the number is, I'm going to butcher, but it's like 70% of the world is water.
Yeah.
And 15% of that 70 has been mapped on the ocean floor, which, think about it, that's probably like the Indian Ocean, and all the rest of it hasn't been explored. So, as much as we want to feel like we know everything, I caution us as a civilization to not fall into that and to keep exploring, keep going out, keep searching for things. Because if nobody went out and saw those metallic orbs, right, Mark, you would have never heard about it here, where you are. The exploration of firsthand knowledge is what leads us to have an internet and things like that. The internet's not supposed to be the main. It's not supposed to replace that. We need to go out and explore. We need to find answers. We need to keep digging because, again, your theories don't disprove science. Better science disproves science. And you have to get there, and books have already been rewritten. When I was in school, we don't have a planet anymore. You know what I mean? When I was in school, there were 7 continents. Now there's 5. There's I don't get it, but that's what they tell me. Things have been disproven in our lifetime. Mysteries have been solved. And for this, almost 60 years ago, are there still we just weren't as technologically advanced now with data farms, with hard copies, with things like that. When they had it saved, it's very easy that if you just threw a box away, like they were talking about the box of documents, if you just threw it in the trash, that was it. Back then, you're all right.
That's it.
It's done. It's over.
Yeah.
The idea of a backup or cloud-based, storage or things that didn't exist back then. So,
but what's interesting about it, what's interesting about it is that all of these documents are missing. The NASA box is missing. Somebody infiltrated the fire department and got rid of those records. And then part of the story is also a man named John Murphy, who is a local radio broadcaster, who heard about this story, and I believe he actually either had some legit audio footage or some video footage of the crash. I forget what he had, but he had some really good shit. And then he got a visit from the Men in Black, who ordered him to destroy all of his records. So he did, and then he fled to California, and he was hit by a car out there and died. So, I mean, it's another classic scenario of I mean, it's just like Roswell with military men or men of authority coming around. And it's kind of unclear whether they're military or where they're coming from, whether the government or what. But they bully and harass people to get rid of records. I mean, there's so many records lost about this, and so much. It's so hazy. It's definitely not a meteor. The meteor thing came up with by 5 astronomers who weren't there. You have dozens of witnesses disputing, what happened. It's incredible. It's one of the classic cases. And like I said, I think it inspired a lot of small town, monster movies too.
Absolutely. And, it's not going to it's not going to happen anywhere else, is what I'm trying to say. You know,
Yeah.
that's the quintessential. If you're a horror, geek like me or things like that, that's where those type of things you want to input yourself into, that, and that's what has so much appeal about this. It's I don't want to say definite because it's always up for debate, but it's definitely top five, and it probably is number two behind Roswell in
Oh yeah.
UFO lore in the United States. And how serious the town takes it, how much they get behind it. There's UFO conventions in Kecksburg.
Yeah.
There's, nostalgia, Americana, if you will, if you ever were
Yeah.
to drive through there and get to see a piece of history
Yeah.
in Kecksburg, and it's their claim to fame, and I really truly believe something happened there. And I don't know if we're ever going to get the full story. I do believe those documents are missing and not hidden. I do believe they were destroyed or, thrown away. But like how we were talking about, if they come in and muscle you and things like that, and they grab your file, that's it. You don't have another copy of
Yeah.
it, you know. So unfortunately, we have to go on the talk, and hearsay, because even things now, if something were to come out, it's probably the son of somebody, the daughter of
Right.
somebody who
Exactly.
experienced it, and they told me. So, we do have to keep that alive. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but, I don't know if the firsthand accounts are here 60 years later, and how accurate they would even be. But
Yeah. At
definitely
this
the
point.
story. I love doing these case dives. There's so much intrigue with this story, and there's multiple different facets too, Mark, that we can grab onto. That's interesting in its own right, and leads us into everything, like you just did with CIA and Kennedy. So
Yeah.
So that's it for us today. We appreciate everybody listening. Thank you so much. Please like, subscribe, leave a comment, leave us a good review. If you have a story or you would like to share an experience with us, please email us at labeledparanormal@gmail.com. You can find us on any podcasting site, even Alexa, they play Labeled Paranormal. And, we really appreciate all you guys taking your time out to listen to us. And, we'll be back with more case studies. We'll get into cryptids coming up soon. We can't wait to do this. And we really, truly
Yeah.
appreciate the following that we've received. So I want to say thank you, everyone. Be safe. Have a good night. And until next time, keep being weird.
See you guys.